Hi, Democrats. Today is Thursday, June 2nd, and it's time for the Chair's Daily Life. And just as the caption says, it's Thursday. So, folks, here we are again. And I know you guys are tired of seeing my tired of gun violence face, but it's all I have right now. Yesterday, after our live, so in the 24 hours since the last time I was here talking to you, there was yet one more mass shooting in Oklahoma. A gunman was able to buy a handgun yesterday, hours before he went to a doctor's office, and tragically ended the lives of two doctors, a patient, and a staff member at the clinic. I've struggled all day or last 24 hours and trying to figure out what to say. What can I say that's encouraging? And you guys know what I'm going to say. And thank you, Scott, for popping that up. But I disagree. This is not the new Oklahoma. This is the Oklahoma that we directly legislated. What has happened? What happened yesterday was tragic. It was predictable. And regardless of what our mayor will tell you, it was political. We did not get here by happenstance. We got here directly through legislation. But before I go into that, we've invited a guest onto our show today to give us some insight into the life of Dr. Phillips. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Harvey Jenkins. He knew Dr. Phillips. Can you tell us how you knew Dr. Phillips?
Yes, I did my spine surgery fellowship training at Harvard, and I was a recipient of the Daniel Hogan Spine Surgery Fellowship, which allowed me to train with a world-renowned spine surgeon who was Dr. Augustus White. Dr. Augustus White may not be a common name to most people, but he is legendary in the world of spine surgery. Dr. White is also African American, although you can't tell that by looking at it. And so that has created a bunch of interesting things in his life where he's had to negotiate his blackness, but not looking black, and having an understanding that the way that we make surgery a better place for Black people and that African American people can be taken better care of. And then there's certain things that we need to do to influence diversity in care. Preston Phillips was the first recipient of the Daniel Hogan's Spine Surgery Fellow, and he got to train with Dr. White. He was the first Black person. And 2 years later, when I became the second Black person to win that fellowship, Dr. Augustus White could not stop talking about Preston Phillips. He was the most talented, the most intellectual, the most intelligent person that he had trained. And he was so proud that this person was his protege. And to be able to release him into the world with these wonderful skills that would be hard to get anywhere else in the world, and such that he would be able to help people. And specifically with attention to minority populations and not treating them in a way that their care is managed appropriately. So that's how Preston Phillips and I crossed paths initially, is that he was the standard that I was kind of forced to live up to when I worked with Dr. White. And I kind of knew, because I'd done some reading. I'd encountered articles about Preston Phillips and his accomplishments prior to even meeting Dr. White or knowing that I would end up in the same a successor in the same position that he was in. And I knew that he was a very accomplished man, Ivy League trained, won every kind of award that you can possibly win. What Dr. White liked about Preston was not only his accomplishment and his skills, but the fact that he was a very humane person and he was a very humble person. I went into the position knowing that I was never going to be as great as Preston. I probably could be good, though. And what I knew in my heart, though, is that I could be as humane and as humble as Preston was. That was a standard that Preston said that I could live up to, and I did. My second encounter with Preston Phillips was 2 years after I started my private practice in Oklahoma City. Dr. White had given Preston my phone number and said, "Hey, Harvey's down in Oklahoma too." Preston at the time had been practicing at Harborview Hospital, one of the nation's best trauma centers, as an academic faculty member in the orthopedic surgery department. And he decided to make a change in his career and decided to go into private practice. So I was already here to the mystification of Dr. White. He wondered, why on earth would I ever go to Oklahoma? And then Preston follows suit and ends up in Tulsa. And what I told Preston was, you'll love Oklahoma. The people are really great. The winters here are nothing like they were in Boston, and the cost of living will be unbeatable. You'll never find a place that is comfortable to live. But then again, 2003 is a little different than what Oklahoma is in 2022. Things have changed. He seemed to be happy in his practice and did well. I lost touch with him for many years. And so I had assumed that Preston, who could write his ticket and work any place that he wanted in the country or in the world, would probably have chosen after a few years to go someplace more fancy, a lot bigger. But no, Preston, I learned, remained in Oklahoma City. And the way that I found out was through the massacre and the mass shooting that happened at St. Francis yesterday. Before the information was released, I put together the information, and I had other people contacting me who identified him as one of the victims. And it was something that I haven't shed any tears about, but it's something that I'm very angry about, because he wasn't just a surgeon. It's like playing a chess game. This person who shot him and killed him and destroyed his family and the people who love him, he killed a king. It wasn't just a regular person. He was accomplished. He was among what the best our community can offer. People like Preston Phillips are able to inspire young kids who are Black and to understand the possibilities that can exist for them. People like Preston are people that I didn't have when I was coming up. Preston was one of the first Black orthopedic spine surgeons or orthopedic surgeons I've met in my entire life. And that was at the end of my training in Boston. And so the fact that this person's life was taken and it ended in this manner when he had done everything the proper way and it was able to achieve what most people would never be able to achieve is what angers me. It's like he didn't just take out a regular person, he took out a king.
Think a little bit of humanity to the names that we've heard over the news. We keep hearing names: Dr. Preston, Dr. Houston, Mr. Love, Miss Amanda Glenn. We just keep hearing names, but we wanted to put, some humanity to one of the victims, and actually the primary targeted victim. There's been some speculation, Dr. Jenkins, about the 7-day opioid law. Are you familiar with this?
Vaguely. If you explain to me what you know about it, I can definitely give you my opinion.
So what I understand is that folks who come asking for pain to a non-primary care physician or at an emergency room or in a clinic are given 7-day prescriptions versus 30-day prescriptions for opioids. And there's been some, let's be clear, I do not condone the justification or rationalization, and that's not, but I want to end this conversation. There's been some discussion that this gentleman had a session, it wasn't helping him, and he was angry with Dr. Phillips.
Once I had determined prior to which was probably before Preston's name was released, I deduced that yes, he was one of the victims. And I had also deduced that it may have had something to do with pain management and pain control, and how in the state of Oklahoma, the pain management has been criminalized, and doctors are afraid to provide adequate amounts of pain control for patients because they're afraid that they will be locked up. Their licenses will be yanked. Their careers will be destroyed. I personally am a victim of the approach to pain management in the state of Oklahoma. I didn't get killed because of it, but it looks like that led to the death of 4 innocent people. Dr. Preston Phillips was probably just doing what the state requires, and trying to help the patient, but being limited by bad policy and bad legislation. Not every patient is the same. Not every patient is going to be pain-free in 7 days after a major spine operation. Some people, and most of the people in my practice, were people that surgery didn't help, and they were still having significant amount of pain, and they didn't want to go to the street to get dangerous drugs and become addicted, because the street drugs are not regulated. But what the state has done through bad laws and its need to pat itself on the back is to create situations that put doctors in a position where now their lives are being at risk, and the staff members who have nothing to do with this, their lives are being taken away. So you combine bad gun policy, accessibility to guns, and the permissive attitudes about guns in the state and nationwide, then you add that to criminalization of the treatment of pain management. Yes, doctors are going to die. I think I kind of made references to that 7 years ago, why all of this criminalization of pain management was a bad idea. And personally, I've had my life threatened as a doctor when I had to make a decision not to prescribe pain medicines to a person because maybe they had methamphetamine in their system, and that was a violation of the agreement the patient had with me to prescribe. So I had to order hire armed security in my clinic to protect my life and the lives of my staff members. I don't know if security was an option for the orthopedic practice that Dr. Phillips was in, but I could have predicted this because I had been getting threats so often when I had to say no to a patient that I couldn't serve because of the restrictions that the state put on me in the way that I prescribe. So I'm not saying that I predicted that this would happen to him. No, but I predicted this kind of incident would happen nationwide because bad gun policy and bad pain management policy was very silly and not well thought out laws and policies. And all of those things can be changed very easily.
Okay, I'm sorry. I keep muting myself so that there's not any background noise. And I just, for me, yes, there's bad, BNDD policies, and there's bad gun policies. But as I said earlier, this was predictable. Not
Yes.
necessarily this exact situation, but we knew another mass shooting was happening. We knew it was going to happen. I listened to the police chief say, we were so very well prepared because we would be naive to believe that this wouldn't happen.
That's true, and it's false, because if you knew that this situation could happen, then there's a lot of things that you could have assisted with legislatively to make it hard for this to happen. Again, we live in a state where everybody seems to pride themselves and their masculinity on gun ownership, and there are more people in this nation that own more than one gun. There are more guns in this nation than there are people in this nation. That tells you that there is a problem, and that can be fixed and addressed and solved. And it's not by making guns more available. It could be an issue of mental health, like the other side tries to argue. But the problem with that is that they don't fund it. And they never mention the word gun when they're talking about mental health. So that's a ruse. The other side talks about the guns and what we need to do to make them more available. The problem is we don't have 60 votes in the United States Senate. So we can't do anything about guns. And so until we're able to do something about it, get ready for this to happen again and again, because the Rubicon has been crossed, and I'm sure some sick copycat is going to walk into another doctor's office, mad that they can't get their pain controlled, and chooses the options to end the lives of innocent people.
So I want to address something. We don't have a gun access problem as far as not enough good folks can get guns. In America, there are 120 guns for every 100 people.
Right.
So you can get a gun. To me, that is the challenge.
Yeah.
Everyone who can put together the pennies, the hundreds of dollars to get a gun doesn't necessarily need to have a gun.
Absolutely.
And when you say, I want to be clear, the police, the job of the police is to enforce our current laws. What has to happen now is that we have to hold our legislators accountable to keeping us safe.
Absolutely.
Their primary responsibility need not trying to make sure that the gun lobby, and NRA is not the only gun lobby,
Sure.
the gun lobby isn't funding them. In Oklahoma, the primary gun lobby is OK2A, and they're bullies. And a lot of our legislators are afraid of them. They need to be primarily concerned with keeping us safe. The laws aren't impossible. It's not like we have to do some calculus to figure out what the laws are. Close the loopholes on gun the waiting periods. Close the loophole on the waiting period. No one should be able to be so angry today, go in and buy a gun and kill people today.
Absolutely.
You know, it's the laws aren't that impossible. They don't have to create them from scratch. They don't have to figure out what they are. We know what the laws that need to be changed are. And
absolutely.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I hope comes from this tragedy is the recognition that Preston wasn't just a normal guy. He was an exceptional human being in every way that you can define it and slice it. He worked his way to the mountaintop through so much adversity that most people who look like him and me can't do very easily. He survived. He became the glaring example of the best that we can be as a people. And then what happens? He was probably still climbing mountains. I don't climb mountains anymore. I kind of happy where I am. He was probably still climbing mountains in his life, but somebody stopped him. They stopped our best one. And so what I'm hoping that the media gets out of this is that no one is safe. If Preston Phillips cannot be safe in Tulsa, in America, no one can be safe. And so I hope that they get in the next few days or throughout the news cycle until this dies, an understanding of what a great person that we lost and how this is a tragedy. And maybe that will make some additional sense to legislators, policymakers, or incite people to vote, incite people to make it an issue so that this doesn't happen again to anybody.
Thank you for bringing up that point. I've thought over the last 19 days and the many mass shootings that we've had in the last 19 days and the ones that they highlight on the news. Yeah. And then I think about Dr. Phillips and everything that I've read about Dr. because I live in Tulsa. So the folks that I know who have been putting out the testimonials, as you say, he was one of our best and brightest. He was a physician, a Harvard educated physician who was at work in South Tulsa at one of the most prestigious hospitals in town. And he wasn't safe. And so I don't know what it's going to take because obviously it doesn't take people getting gunned down at the grocery store. It doesn't take people getting gunned down as they worship. It doesn't take babies being murdered as they're in elementary school. Maybe people will care because now it's a couple of physicians who were at work. Maybe people will care now because it happened in South Tulsa, supposedly affluent part of town. Maybe now they will care. We've got to do something. So Dr. Jenkins, I want to say thank you very much for joining us, but now I'm going to move into my regular programming. Thank you for joining us and giving us that insight and adding some humanity to the man that Dr. Preston Phillips was, because I think it's important that they're not just names that we hear on the news. They're not just a still photo that, somebody puts up on the news, that we make the victims of these tragedies actual human beings so that people know who they are and know what we as a society are losing by turning a blind eye and a deaf ear to what is happening. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all of the work that you are doing and giving attention to this particular issue. If people like you are not talking about it, we have no chance of anything changing. You're our only hope. And if there's anything else that I can do as a citizen, you let me know, because, as I said, I'm not sad. I am angry. I am livid.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. And so, to that point, everybody who is watching me, whether you're watching me live or you're watching me later, um, everybody keeps calling for action. So, I'm going to be very specific. I'm going to be very specific of what action you can take. Today is Thursday, June 2nd. In the state of Oklahoma, Friday, June 3rd, is the deadline to register to vote in order to participate in the primary that's happening on June 28th. So, what you can do is A, verify that you're still registered. And if you're not, hurry up and register. B, register everyone you know and make sure that they understand what is at stake right now. Register everyone you know and then show up at the polls. Do your research. Identify the legislators who have been too weak, too in bed with the gun lobby, or too complacent to do something about the gun crisis that we are experiencing right now in America and particularly Oklahoma. I was asked a question today and I want to clear it up and I want you guys to hear my answer. I was asked a question today. The reporter said to me, Oklahoma is a gun-friendly state. How do you think we can change? My answer is really simple. There is no reason that we can't be a gun-friendly town, a state, and a gun-safe state. So I demand, my demand has not been watered down. I demand that our legislators pursue reasonable, common sense gun safety laws. Call a special session if you have to. We are at an emergency. In 1 week, we've had 2 mass shootings in our state. It's too much. It's too close. Thank you for joining me, and we'll be back here tomorrow at 4:15. You guys have a peaceful evening.